The Galactic Empire had never lost a battle. Their fleet was the largest, the most powerful, and the most feared force in the galaxy. Wherever they went, civilizations fell to their knees. Their warships were massive, their technology unmatched. Entire star systems surrendered at the mere sight of their fleet. Now, they were preparing for another victory. The Imperial Armada had been sent to crush a rebellion on the outer edges of the galaxy. Millions of warships stood ready, weapons primed, engines roaring through the vast emptiness of space. Their commanders watched their screens, waiting for the enemy to show itself. But there was no enemy fleet. Only one ship appeared on their scanners. A single, small warship. The Imperial officers stared at the screen in confusion. It wasn't a battleship, nor a dreadnought. It wasn't even an escort cruiser. It was something else. An old, dark warship floating in the void, facing an entire armada alone. The command deck of the Imperial flagship erupted in laughter. "This is the Resistance," one officer scoffed. "One ship. Perhaps they think they can surrender with honor," another chuckled. Admiral Carvox, the supreme commander of the Imperial Armada, smirked. "Fools. Destroy it." A fleet of 1,000,000 ships didn't need to waste time. One ship was nothing. One ship was insignificant. Yet, something felt wrong. The Imperial sensors struggled to scan the vessel. Its data didn't match any known ship design. It was dark, its hull worn and battle-scarred, as if it had seen centuries of war. There were no visible weapons, no energy signatures, nothing that suggested it was a threat. But it didn't run. It didn't surrender. It just waited. Admiral Carvox leaned forward. "Why aren't they hailing us?" No response. The silence of space was broken by a single transmission. A deep, calm voice echoed across the Imperial fleet. "You should have left humanity alone." And then the lone ship moved, faster than anything the Empire had ever seen. And the battle began. The Imperial fleet was silent for a moment. The words echoed through their communication channels, but no one understood how they had come. The small warship, this so-called human vessel, had no visible communication arrays, no advanced transmitters, and no known technology capable of breaking through Imperial encryption. And yet, its message had reached every ship, every officer, even Admiral Carvox himself. A chill ran through the command deck. "Lock weapons and fire," Carvox ordered, shaking off the unease. The Empire's warships obeyed instantly. A wall of energy blasts, enough to destroy entire moons, surged toward the lone human warship. The firepower of 1,000,000 vessels converged on a single target. The ship should have been obliterated. But it wasn't. The moment the blasts should have struck, the human ship vanished. Gasps filled the Imperial bridge. Officers scrambled at their consoles, trying to find an explanation. Did it cloak?" one officer stammered. "No known cloaking technology is that fast," another shouted. The scanners flickered, struggling to track the missing ship. Then, just as suddenly, it reappeared. But not where they had expected. It was behind them, and it was moving fast. Too fast. The Nemesis, for that was the name they finally picked up from its hull, cut through space like a ghost. It was not following the normal laws of physics. No inertia, no acceleration curve. It simply moved, as if space itself bent to its will. Panic erupted across the fleet. "Reposition our ships," Carvox barked. "Form a defensive wall." The Empire had fought thousands of battles. No enemy had ever outmaneuvered them. But the Nemesis was not an ordinary enemy. Then, for the first time, the human warship fired. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't a laser. It was something different. A pulse of blue energy surged from the ship, moving like a ripple in water. It passed through the first line of Imperial warships. No explosions, no impact, just a strange hum that filled their systems. And then, suddenly, silence. Every Imperial warship in that wave shut down. Lights flickered. Shields collapsed. Weapons failed. Entire battleships floated helplessly in space, dead in the void. On the command deck, alarms screamed. Officers scrambled to reboot systems, but nothing responded. Admiral Carvox's blood ran cold. "What kind of weapon is that?" he whispered. And then the human ship hailed them again. "You should have left humanity alone." This time, the voice was not calm. This time, it was a warning, and the real battle was about to begin. The Imperial fleet was in chaos. Thousands of warships, once the pride of the Galactic Empire, now floated helplessly in space, their systems crippled by a weapon they couldn't understand. Officers screamed into malfunctioning communication systems, engineers scrambled to reboot unresponsive consoles, and admirals barked desperate orders to ships that could no longer move or fire. Admiral Carvox clenched his fists, his mandibles grinding together as he stared at the tactical display. Half of his fleet had been disabled without a single shot being fired in the conventional sense. No explosions, no visible impact, just a pulse of energy that rendered them useless. He refused to believe it. No species, no matter how advanced, should have the ability to disable an entire battle group with a single wave of energy. Yet the human warship, the Nemesis, remained untouched, hovering silently among the dead fleet like a predator circling its prey. Then, as if to mock them further, it moved again. But it didn't accelerate or follow normal maneuvering patterns. It shifted, almost like it had teleported, appearing behind another cluster of Imperial warships in an instant. A second energy pulse rippled through space. More ships went dark. More officers screamed in helpless terror. Carvox slammed his fist against the control panel, his breathing heavy with frustration. "How is it doing this?" he growled. His second-in-command, Captain Vorlex, struggled for an answer. "Admiral, this is beyond anything we have ever encountered. We don't even know if it's using conventional technology. No reactor signatures, no known energy readings, nothing." Carvox's mind raced. The Empire had fought countless wars, crushed hundreds of civilizations under its might, and yet one warship, a relic from a species they had dismissed as insignificant, was dismantling the strongest fleet ever assembled. And then the human ship attacked again. This time, there was no energy pulse. This time, it was something worse. The Nemesis flickered, vanished, and reappeared inside their formation, weaving between warships with impossible precision. Then, in a movement too fast to track, it split apart, or at least it seemed to. Multiple copies of the ship appeared, each one moving independently, phasing through enemy ships like ghosts. Multiple hostiles detected. A panicked officer shouted, "No, wait, they're all the same ship." Or holograms? Projections? I don't. The confusion only grew worse as weapons from the Nemesis began firing. Unlike the energy pulse that had disabled their systems, these were direct strikes. Thin, precise beams of blue light that sliced through Imperial warships as if they were made of paper. No explosion, no traditional damage, just instant destruction. Entire sections of battleships vanished, as if erased from existence. Screams filled the Imperial command deck as warships were cut apart with surgical precision. "This is impossible," Vorlex shouted. "What kind of weapons erase matter itself?" Admiral Carvox could only watch as his fleet was annihilated. He had thought the Nemesis was a forgotten relic, a foolish remnant of a dead race. Now he understood the truth. The ship was beyond them, beyond their understanding, beyond their technology. And the humans, wherever they were, had built it. The realization was chilling. And then, once again, the human warship hailed them. The voice came through their failing systems, clear and calm. But this time, there was no amusement, no warning. There was only judgment. "You wanted war," the human voice said. "Now you will learn what war truly is." Admiral Carvox stood frozen, his mandibles twitching in disbelief. The Imperial fleet, the strongest in the known galaxy, was being torn apart by a single human warship. It was an impossibility, a nightmare made real. The Nemesis had already disabled half their armada without conventional weapons, and now its precise blue beams of energy were erasing ships from existence, not exploding them, not damaging them, erasing them. Entire sections of warships simply vanished, cut away as if they had never existed. He turned to his second-in-command, Captain Vorlex, whose many eyes flickered in fear. "What do we do?" Vorlex whispered, his voice barely audible over the panic shouting of their officers. "We cannot fight this." Karvok's claws dug into the control panel, the smooth metal creaking under his grip. He refused to believe it. The Galactic Empire had ruled for millennia, crushed countless species beneath its might, and had never faced a single opponent they could not defeat. And yet, here they were, helpless, watching their fleet crumble around them. "Prepare the dreadnoughts," Karvok growled. Vorlex flinched. "Admiral, we can't." "Do it," Karvok bellowed, slamming his fist against the console. The Empire's dreadnoughts were their last resort, the largest and most powerful warships ever created. They were city-sized behemoths, equipped with shields strong enough to withstand planetary bombardments and weapons capable of shattering moons. If anything could stop the Nemesis, it was them. Across the fleet, the remaining Imperial warships parted, making way for the dreadnoughts to emerge. 5 of them, each a symbol of the Empire's unchallenged supremacy, activated their main cannons and locked onto the lone human warship. Their massive energy reserves surged, gathering power for a single devastating strike. Karvok allowed himself a brief moment of relief. Nothing had ever survived a full dreadnought barrage. Nothing. But then, something changed. The Nemesis stopped moving. It simply hovered there, as if it was waiting. The silence was unsettling. The dreadnoughts fired. 5 beams of pure destruction, each one capable of melting entire continents, tore through space, straight at the Nemesis. For a brief second, Karvok felt hope. The entire command deck held their breath. The beams hit. A blinding explosion filled the void, consuming the space where the Nemesis had been. The Imperial officers cheered. "We did it." Someone shouted, "It's over." But Karvok knew better. His eyes stayed locked on the view screen, watching as the explosion faded. And there it was, the Nemesis, completely untouched. The warship hadn't even raised a shield. The dreadnought's most powerful weapons had done nothing. "Impossible," Vorlex whispered, his voice trembling. Then, the Nemesis moved. 1 second, it was there. The next, it was behind the dreadnoughts. And then, it struck. The same eerie blue beams sliced through the first dreadnought like it was paper, cutting through its reinforced armor as if it wasn't even there. There was no explosion, only a silent, horrifying erasure as the entire ship was severed in half. Thousands of Imperial crew members vanished in an instant. The second dreadnought tried to turn, its massive thrusters struggling to shift its enormous weight. It didn't matter. The Nemesis fired again. The thin line of blue light traced along the dreadnought's spine. Then it split apart, the halves floating lifelessly into the void. "Retreat," Karvok shouted, pure panic seizing him. "Get us out of here. Now." But it was too late. The third and fourth dreadnoughts were gone before they could react. The Nemesis moved faster than anything Karvok had ever seen, its weapons cutting through Imperial warships like a god tearing apart reality itself. The final dreadnought, the largest of them all, fired every weapon it had, launching a storm of missiles, plasma bolts, and kinetic rounds. None of them hit. The Nemesis simply shifted, its form flickering like a shadow, phasing through every attack. Then it fired one last time. A single precise beam. The Imperial flagship, the pride of the fleet, the symbol of the Galactic Empire, was silently cut in half. Karvok collapsed into his chair, his body trembling. He had lost. The Empire had lost. The most powerful fleet in the galaxy had been annihilated by one ship. And then, the Nemesis spoke again, the same calm, Human voice echoed through their failing systems. Your empire is over. Carvox's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just a battle. This was a warning. And the Galactic Empire had ignored it. Until it was far too late. Admiral Carvox's mind raced, his body frozen in fear as the Galactic Empire's strongest fleet was being erased before his very eyes. The Nemesis had already carved through his warships like a blade through mist. Now, with terrifying precision, it had torn apart 4 of the 5 dreadnoughts, massive ships that were supposed to be unstoppable. The last dreadnought, the Crown of Dominion, was the only one still intact. But Carvox knew it wouldn't last. The humans hadn't spoken since their chilling message. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't offer terms. They simply kept destroying everything in their path. Carvox gripped the control panel, his claws trembling. "Open a channel," he barked, "to the human vessel. Now." His officers scrambled, their hands shaking as they established the link. A moment later, the screen flickered to life. There, standing in a dimly lit bridge, was a human. He wasn't armored. He wasn't shouting threats. He simply stared at Carvox with cold, emotionless eyes. "This is Admiral Carvox of the Galactic Empire," he said, forcing authority into his voice. "We acknowledge your strength. We are willing to negotiate." The human didn't react. He remained still, his expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "Negotiate." His voice was calm, but something about it made Carvox's exoskeleton crawl. "Your empire came to our colonies. You burned our worlds. You slaughtered civilians. And now you want to negotiate." Carvox swallowed hard. We did not know the full extent of." "You knew enough." The human's voice was ice. "You thought humanity was weak. You thought we would break. Instead, you woke something you cannot stop." Carvox's mandibles twitched in panic. This was his only chance. "I can stop the war," he pleaded. "I have command of the remaining Imperial fleets. If we stand down, the Empire will follow." The human finally moved. He stepped forward, closer to the screen, his face still unreadable. "You misunderstand." The screen flickered. A new image appeared. Carvox's vision blurred as he stared in shock. It was a fleet. A human fleet. Thousands of ships, each one different in size and shape, but all deadly. He had thought the Nemesis was alone. He had been wrong. The human admiral's voice returned. "We were never here to negotiate. We were only here to deliver a message." Carvox felt his stomach drop. The view outside his bridge darkened. No, it was blocked by something massive. The largest human warship he had ever seen descended from hyperspace directly above his dreadnought. It made the Crown of Dominion look tiny in comparison. Carvox barely had time to react before the human admiral spoke one last time. "Your empire ends today." The comms cut. The human fleet opened fire. And Carvox finally understood what it meant to be hunted. The bridge of the Crown of Dominion was in chaos. Alarms blared, the crimson glow of emergency lights casting eerie shadows over the terrified crew. Admiral Carvox's breathing was ragged, his claws gripping the control console as he stared at the nightmare unfolding outside. The human fleet had arrived, and now the Galactic Empire's greatest warship was about to be buried under an avalanche of firepower. It had happened so fast. One moment, Carvox had been desperately trying to negotiate, clinging to the hope that the humans would accept surrender. The next, the largest human warship he had ever seen had dropped from hyperspace right on top of them, its sheer size blocking out the stars. Then came the barrage. The human fleet had opened fire with terrifying coordination. There was no fanfare, no warnings, no final ultimatum. Just obliteration. Carvox watched in horror as the remains of his once mighty armada were torn apart. Hundreds of Empire warships, destroyers, battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, exploded one by one, their shields shredded like paper, their hulls turned into molten slag. The void was filled with debris and the desperate, short-lived distress signals of doomed ships. It was not a battle. It was a massacre. The crown of Dominion trembled violently as a blast rocked the starboard side. The bridge lights flickered, sparks rained from overhead consoles, and screams filled the air. Shields at 40%. A panicked officer cried, "We can't withstand another direct hit like that." Carvox felt a deep, suffocating sense of dread. His fleet, the strongest fleet the Empire had ever assembled, was being annihilated. And the worst part, the humans weren't even struggling. This was effortless for them. He turned his gaze back to the tactical screen. It was a sea of red, each marker representing a destroyed Imperial warship. The humans had barely lost anything. They were toying with him. The comm officer let out a gasp. "Admiral, the human flagship is hailing us again." Carvox's mandibles clicked together. His body trembled, not with anger, but pure terror. He knew, deep in his core, that this was the end. "Put it through," he said, though his voice was barely a whisper. The screen flickered. The human admiral stood there once more, his expression unchanged, cold, unreadable, merciless. He did not look victorious. He did not look satisfied. He simply stared, as if Carvox was nothing more than an insect waiting to be crushed. "Your fleet is gone," the human finally said. His voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of something ancient and unyielding. "Your empire is finished." Carvox opened his mouth, but no words came. He had no defense, no escape, no more lies to tell. The Empire had believed humanity was weak. They had believed they were just another species to conquer. But now, as Carvox stood on the burning bridge of his dying flagship, he finally understood the truth. Humanity had not been the ones hunted. They had been waiting. And now they had returned, not as victims, but as executioners. The screen cut out. The human flagship charged its main weapon, and Admiral Carvox closed his eyes as the crown of Dominion was swallowed by fire. The battlefield was silent. The wreckage of the once mighty Galactic Empire's fleet drifted through space like shattered bones of a long-dead beast. Fire still burned in the broken hulls of warships that had once been symbols of absolute power, now nothing more than floating graves. The few surviving Empire vessels had fled, their captains unwilling to face the terrifying force that had ended their dominion in a single battle. At the center of it all, the lone human dreadnought stood, untouched, unchallenged, and victorious. Inside its bridge, Admiral Cole watched the final moments of the engagement with a cold, calculating gaze. His crew sat in stunned silence. Some looked at the tactical display, their minds struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Others watched the debris field, listening to the dying signals of escape pods drifting aimlessly. The battle had not just been a victory, it had been an execution. The Galactic Empire, an empire that had ruled through fear for centuries, was finished. "Sir," one of the officers finally spoke, "enemy signals have gone silent. No reinforcements detected. The last of their fleet has either surrendered or retreated." Admiral Cole nodded. He had expected as much. The Empire had been broken long before this battle. They just hadn't known it yet. "Open a channel to the nearest Empire command station," he ordered. The comms officer hesitated. "Admiral, the station isn't responding." "Force the signal," Cole said, his tone calm but absolute. "They'll listen." A moment later, the view screen flickered to life. A trembling Empire official appeared, a high-ranking minister, his once opulent robes now wrinkled, his expression a mixture of fear and disbelief. The arrogance, the superiority that the Empire's rulers had always carried, it was gone. All that remained was a being who now understood the price of underestimating humanity. Cole let the silence stretch, making the minister feel the weight of it. Then he spoke. "Your fleet is gone. Your empire is collapsing. You have a choice," he said. His voice was steady, like a judge delivering a final sentence. "Surrender, or humanity will finish what we started. The minister's mandibles clicked nervously. He struggled to form words, but the weight of reality crushed him. Finally, he nodded. "We surrender." His voice was barely above a whisper. Cole gave a slow, final nod. "Good choice." The transmission cut out. The bridge was silent once more. The war was over. A deep breath filled Cole's lungs. This had never been about conquest. It had never been about revenge. This had been about survival. The Empire had started this war, believing humans were just another species to dominate. They had made a fatal mistake. Because humanity never lost. They endured. They adapted. And when the time came, they conquered.